Hello everyone. In this session, we will discuss the mechanism of public and private keys in blockchain. What is a public key? A public key is a number generated from mathematical operations to let a user receive cryptocurrencies from other users into their account. A cryptographically generated public and private key pair ensures the security of users' assets in a crypto economy. A unique pair of public key and private key is created for each user in a blockchain system. Each key is a fixed length, alphanumeric string. Of the pair, the private key is not known to others but only to its owner. Knowing the private key means that the user can spend, transfer or withdraw from the associated account. A cryptographically secure algorithm uses the private key in order to generate the public key. A digital wallet is used to store the key pair. When a user initiates a transaction in order to send some crypto tokens to another user, it is broadcasted in the blockchain network. The participating nodes in the distributed network checks the validity of this transaction. The miner finalizes this transaction in a block and it is recorded on the blockchain by all nodes. A transaction is digitally signed by the sender using its private key. The digital signature is provided to prove the ownership of private key for the spent input assets. The signature does not disclose the private key, but only the fact that the private key is known to the user. In order to verify the signature, the corresponding public key is used to prove that the digital signature has indeed been created using the correct private key. Once the transaction is validated and included in a block accepted by the network, the funds are sent to the recipient's address. The public address is generated from the public key, which in turn was generated from the private key of the user. The user address is generated by performing some hashing operations on the public key. The public key is compressed to form a public address. Now to transfer assets on a blockchain, two people come to an agreement. To send coins or tokens, they share their public addresses. You can think of the public address as a bank account number. The sender uses the receiver's public address to send the funds, who can then spend or withdraw these funds using the private key of the address. The receiver can also check if the funds received are indeed from the sender's account by checking their public address. The involvement of highly secure cryptography ensures that the private key can never be guessed from the public key and address, even though they are derived from the private key. These are complicated mathematical functions to ensure that to calculate private key from the public key is computationally very intensive. It is of prime importance as the public key and the user address are public in the network. Now, as it is computationally not possible to derive the private key from its public key or address, if a user misplaces the private key, the account cannot be recovered and any token held in that account becomes inaccessible forever. Whereas, the lost public key can be recreated anytime with the private key. Next is the private key. A private key is used in blockchains to claim ownership of the underlying tokens and assets. Its security protects the user funds from theft and unauthorized access. When transacting cryptocurrencies on a blockchain, a user has a public address and a private key to send and receive coins or tokens. Sender deposits the funds and the receiver gets them on the public address. But to use or withdraw the tokens deposited in a user's address, the private key is what is essential. As we have mentioned, it is computationally difficult and so nearly impossible to generate the private key back from its public key. The private key is a long, alphanumeric string, which makes it hard to guess. If you think of a public address as a safe, the private key is the combination for it. A better analogy will be a mailbox in which the mailman, and anyone, can insert letters and packages through an opening in it. However, only the owner with its key can retrieve the contents from it. So it is critical to keep the key safe for the safety of crypto tokens. If it is stolen, the mailbox can be compromised and possession of contents changed. Digital wallets are used to store the private keys. When a transaction is instigated at the sender's end, the wallet signs the transaction with a digital signature using the private key stored in it. A valid signature for a transaction can only be generated using the correct private key of the owner. This ensures the system's security and ownership of assets. A valid digital signature confirms that the transaction comes from a particular user. Even a slight alteration in the transaction data changes its signature. In case the user loses their private key, the wallet can no longer be accessed to spend, withdraw, or transfer the underlying assets. It is, therefore, critical to secure the private key. As covered in the earlier section, depending on the type of wallet, private keys can be stored differently. In paper wallets, which are printed papers with the private key and QR code on them, when a transaction needs to be signed, it can easily be scanned. A hardware wallet can also be used to store the private keys. It is a smart card or USB device that secures private keys offline. Another option is a cold storage or an offline software wallet. This wallet is partitioned. One part is the offline partition which stores the private keys. The other is the online division which stores the public keys. When a transaction needs to be signed, it is moved offline to be signed using the offline secured private key. It is then moved back online to be sent in the network. Then there are also hot wallets, which store the private keys on devices connected to the internet or on some public or private cloud. These can be desktop wallets, mobile wallets, or web-based wallets. Let's summarize. The private key remains in the confidential use of the sender and receiver, whereas the public key is made available through the accessible public directory. Now, an important aspect of public and private keys. If a public key is lost, it can easily be retrieved from its private key. But if the private key is lost, then it is nearly impossible to reverse the process by generating a private key from the public key, and this will render the system void. That was all for this session. Thank you.